Welcome to the Victor Emanuel Nature Tours webinar. I am Ben Reynolds, producer and host of the Vent webinar series. Thank you for joining this encore presentation on Voyage of a Lifetime, Antarctica, South Georgia, and the Falkland Islands with Andrew Whittaker. The original broadcast aired on February 11th, 2021 and generated such great interest that Andy's tour sold out. However, Vent has partnered with Aurora Expeditions to offer 2 additional departures aboard the Greg Mortimer. Details of these tours will follow after Andy's presentation. The itineraries are available in the handout section in the toolbar. Should you have any questions, please contact me via email, ben@ventbird.com, or Greg Lopez, Tour Operations Manager, via email, greg@ventbird.com, or call our office at 1-800-328-8368. Now, I would like to introduce you all to Andrew Whittaker. Andrew Whittaker, a senior member of the Vent staff, has led Vent tours since 1993 throughout South and Central America, Antarctica, Europe, Israel, and more recently, Asia. His birding passion began at an early age of 7, thanks to his father, but he is also a true all-around naturalist. Andy immensely enjoys sharing his bird knowledge and fascination for all other aspects of the natural world in a really fun way. Andy was born in England, however, he considers himself Brazilian, having lived more than 30 years in this mega biodiverse country, first working for the Smithsonian Institution, studying Amazonian rainforest birds in Manaus. Andy is a qualified bird bander trained by the late Dr. Clive Menton. A lifelong passion with bird migration has sent Andy working around the globe at several top bird observatories, including Elliott, Israel, Long Point, Canada, and the UK at Sandwich Bay and on Fair Isle, Scotland. Andy is well recognized for his passionate and intimate knowledge of bird vocalizations and taxonomy, which has enabled him to discover several new species, such as the cryptic forest falcon in 2002, and rediscover others thought to be extinct. He is an excellent communicator and tour organizer, and loves nothing better than finding and sharing a rare skulker, or telling one of his many fascinating bird stories. Andy had the honor of working with Sir David Attenborough as a consultant for the prestigious BBC Life of Birds series. He is widely considered an authority on Amazonian birds, having authored numerous technical publications on the region's avifauna. At present, Andy is working with Kevin Zimmer on a comprehensive field guide to the birds of Brazil, to be published by Princeton University Press. Andy is an associate researcher at the Museum Goldi Belém and an active conservationist. He loves photography, with many of his images being used in books, and is an avid football fan of Birmingham City FC and an orchid lover. Andy lives with his partner in life, Jacqueline, and their dog Mozart in Porto Alegre, southern Brazil. We're thrilled to have Andy present about Antarctica, South Georgia, and the Falkland Islands. We hope you enjoy the webinar. Without further ado, we will turn to Andy's presentation.
Thank you, Ben, for that very nice introduction. Welcome, everybody. I am pleased you've been able to join me on this voyage of a lifetime to Antarctica, South Georgia, and the Falkland Islands. This really is a trip of a lifetime. I will begin here with this first image, which was taken on last year's Vent trip. This was my favorite image of the trip, in fact. It tells a story. Basically, you have the ingredients on this image of everything that's great about this trip. Beautiful penguins, fantastic sea, southern oceans, the beautiful blue coloration, icebergs, and action. This image was rather remarkable. It took 2 of us in different zodiacs to work out what was happening here. We were out on a zodiac cruise in the afternoon, and what was actually happening here was this penguin here, this Gentoo penguin, was trying to fly. Now, seriously, he was leaping out the water at an incredible speed, Gentoo penguins are the fastest of all penguins underwater, about 35 to 40 kilometers an hour at the fastest. It was leaping maybe 5 or 6 feet out the water, and the reason was there was a huge apex predator under the water trying to catch it. These individuals here on top of the iceberg were looking down at a leopard seal. Fortunately, it didn't catch one of the penguins, but it was certainly an amazing experience to see. So let's begin our voyage. Penguins are really always a highlight of any Antarctic cruise. This is one of the beautiful crested penguins. This is a macaroni penguin, has a very large bill for the size of its head, and it's mostly feeds on krill. Huge numbers breed on the Sub-Antarctic islands of South Georgia. The other most amazing thing on this voyage of a lifetime are the vistas. South Georgia is just icing on the cake, but here we have a magnificent view of King Highway on South Georgia with these huge mountains and green pastures on a beautiful, glorious day here in the Sub-Antarctic islands. However, for me, as a naturalist, I love watching and observing behavior. The incredible, touching encounters of nature here, particularly with penguins, is remarkable, something you will take back and you will never forget. Here I am sitting by a small colony of Adelie penguins with the very, very plump-looking youngsters here. So Vent is very, very proud to partner along with Polar Latitudes. They have a beautiful passenger cruise vessel here on the left-hand side, HMS Sea Adventure. It's an incredible vessel, extremely comfortable, immaculate conditions on board, with a super knowledgeable group of naturalists, geologists, historians, marine biologists, etc., and a lovely set of friendly staff and excellent cuisine. We also have a number of, as you can see on the right-hand side here, zodiacs that we have at our disposal to have incredible encounters with wildlife, landing on remote islands and seeing just the magnificent wildlife of these islands and Antarctica. But to begin with, we offer a pre-tour to the Antarctic, to Buenos Aires. We visit a couple of very, very nice marshes, an area just outside the city called Costanera Sul. And then we spend a day at Otamendi Nature Reserve. Such birds that can be seen on this pre-trip are the illustrated here, the Maguari stork, the diademed tanager, the exquisite many-colored rush tyrant, and the white tufted grebes. The trip begins in the capital of Buenos Aires. As I said, this is a remarkable city, famous for its tango, excellent food, and interesting nightlife. We have a lovely hotel, the Hilton Hotel, just off the left-hand side of this image here, and we enjoy some fantastic cuisine here at a local restaurant that we walk to. Within the park's limits, there is a lovely park, as I said, with a lot of wildfowl to enjoy. It's one of the best places I've ever been to see rosy-billed pochard like this male here. And from there, the following day, we start our migration south. We follow the incredible migration of one species of bird to the southernmost continent, Antarctica. Anybody have any idea what species of bird I'm talking about? Well, I'm sure some of you will have guessed. It's the Arctic tern. The Arctic tern here, this was photographed during our last trip last year. Wintering down in the Antarctic oceans, they undergo a staggering migration, annual migration of 18,500 miles or 30,000 kilometers round trip. Interesting enough, in the background here, you can see an Antarctic tern in full breeding plumage, whereas this Arctic tern here is in winter plumage. So we take our flight down through Argentina, down the chain of the Andes to Tierra del Fuego, where we land in Ushuaia. This is a beautiful illustration of the Beagle Channel at sunrise. Our hotel is situated up on a lovely hillside, 5-star hotel overlooking the Beagle Channel. Let me read something from Darwin's famous exploration of the Beagle Channel, which is named after his boat. He wrote, in January 1833, it's scarcely possible to imagine anything more beautiful than the beryl-like blue of these glaciers situated along the channel. So from our hotel in the grounds, the delightful hotel, we have some lovely forest trails, but around the grounds themselves, we find Patagonian Sierra finches. This is a male. Also common in and around the town here of Ushuaia is the delightful southern lapwing. Some of you may remember that I wrote a Messages and Memories text about the taxonomy of southern lapwing. If you haven't seen it, you may want to take a look at that. It's kind of an interesting story behind this bird here. So the first full day after a good night's sleep, we enjoy a fascinating excursion to Tierra del Fuego National Park, these beautiful southern beech forests, spectacular views with a lot of interesting new birds to see, including this black-faced ibis. This is a very, very common and vocal bird in the national park. The southern beech forests hold beautiful nuthatch-like white-throated tree runner. However, our main target is the huge and spectacular Magellanic woodpecker. This is in the same genus as the ivory-billed woodpecker, Campephalus, and they really are spectacular. To see this bird flying through the forest showing its big white wing patch is absolutely spectacular. However, for me, the female here is much more beautiful than the spectacular male. She really does look like Woody Woodpecker, doesn't she, with that odd shaped crest. They have a double wrap on these big trees, and they really are always a highlight. From there, we leave the park and travel down to a nice nature reserve right on the outskirts of town by the port called Bahia Encerrada, which is very, very good for water birds, such as these red shoveler. I've never really seen these in big numbers as in the reserve. I've sometimes seen as many as 50 or 60 in a tight flock feeding. They are really, really smart. Then we go straight to the harbor nearby. I just looked at this signpost, took a photograph, and afterwards I see somebody made a mistake. It says Ushuaia at the top there, 1,000 kilometers. I think that should have been 1.0 kilometers. Anyway, this is the Ushuaia harbor. One of the commonest gulls around here is the striking dolphin gull. And then by mid-afternoon, we find ourselves boarding our luxury vessel for the trip of a lifetime. We come on board, we have a welcome reception with a lot of information given to us about the ship itself, and also lots of excellent food available on board. And then we're off on our trip of a lifetime, leaving the harbor there at Ushuaia and start traveling down the famous Beagle Channel, named, as I said, after the ship, the Beagle, that Charles Darwin discovered the amazing nature of South America, etc. So, as I said, we have an amazingly excellent world-class vessel. The Sea Adventure, in fact, has a 1A super ice class rating, allowing us to get into areas that a lot of other ships wouldn't be able to get into safely. So we leave Ushuaia, we travel down the Beagle Channel and across into the Atlantic over towards the Falkland Islands. These subantarctic islands are just absolutely spectacular, very famous, run by the British, fantastic for birds and wildlife. We have a couple of days there to enjoy the Falkland Islands before we steam off again, heading sort of east-southeast towards South Georgia Island, which is again British owned. It is an absolute gem. It's the icing on the cake for me on this Antarctic trip. The sheer numbers of birds there are phenomenal. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. We then travel through to the Scotia Sea, through towards the South Orkney Islands, Elephant Islands that we all know, very famous for Shackleton's story, which we'll talk about later, through to the South Shetlands, where Deception Island is an active volcano, and then down Brown Bluff, and then onto the Antarctic Peninsula, where we'll land. We'll travel down the Lemire Channel and have many, many spots of interest there, stopping off different penguin colonies, before we finally head across the amazing Drake Passage, some fantastic seabird watching there, before returning back to Ushuaia. It really will be a voyage of a lifetime. So as we, in the evening, as we steam down the Beagle Channel, there are lots of birds to see. Black-bowed albatross here. This is actually a bait ball. A lot of fish underneath the water there being chased by Magellanic penguins, which are obviously not in view because they're under the water, with South American terns here catching fish and a couple of giant petrels. So after a good night's sleep on board, we wake up the following morning. We have incredible breakfast spread in front of us. Here's just one illustration of what you can expect, but there is freshly made bread. They will make omelets. They will make anything you basically want on board. Certainly haven't come on this trip to lose weight. The food here is absolutely incredible. And as soon as we've had our breakfast, we'll be out on the decks birding. One of the commonest birds on the decks, around the decks, behind the ship and in front of the ship are black-browed albatross. Very majestic watching these magnificent birds flying by the ship, following us. And soon we'll be encountering our first of the prions. These are very difficult to identify. Going across to the Falklands, the most common ones we will see will be slender-billed prions. They are really beautiful and can become very, very common. They breed on the Falkland Islands. They nest in burrows. However, we'll be all looking out for our first of the great albatrosses. Normally, the first of the great albatrosses that we see are the magnificent southern royal albatross. Here is a lovely adult drifting behind the ship, and look at the color of the ocean. The ocean here is absolutely spectacular. It's so, so rich, and the colors are just so vivid. So we will learn about dress wear. You can see this penguin here has got the thing on the wrong way. Anyway, so this basically, to dress up to visit these islands and the Antarctic is important to know what to do. So we will have some briefings on what to wear, how to wear, and also how to use our zodiacs. These are incredibly comfortable ways of getting off the ship safely and securely. They're impossible to sink. They are very, very comfortable sitting on the rubber inflatables. The ship is very well organized to get you on and off onto these vessels behind the ship, with some very good seamen who will hold you and help you on and off these vessels, and these you'll become to love them. We will also learn about landings. Every landing is very well organized. You'll have able seamen there giving you a hand off and onto the zodiacs. Everything will be told exactly about what to expect before we leave the ship, and when we arrive on the land, you will also get more instructions of exactly what we can do. We then arrive at the Falkland Islands. This is Steeple Jason. It's the largest black-browed albatross colony in the world, so 180,000 pairs. And to sit up there and in this beautiful day here, watching these albatross coming in over your head and feeding the youngsters, normally with some penguins in amongst, is a spectacular experience. Normally on our first landings on the Falklands, we are often greeted by the Magellanic penguins. These penguins, they sound like jackass. They sound like a donkey, a braying donkey, and they nest in burrows. And they are very, very fun to watch. As I said, the black-browed albatross is one of the smaller albatrosses, but to see one close up, to be able to watch them, is really spectacular. This one is with a fairly good-sized youngster. It's about to give it some food. As you can see, the nests here are made of mud, tightly packed together, keeping the youngster warm during the cold weather when they first hatch. Often around these colonies of albatrosses are one of the favorite small penguins, the southern rockhopper penguins. These again are crested penguins, and they are very, very attractive and quite small, but very feisty and really fun to watch. Again, we can sit and enjoy these colonies, watching the different behaviors of courtship. Here's a pair of black-browed albatrosses courting on their nest with some southern rockhopper penguins, adults and chicks in the background, a little creche down on the left-hand side of youngsters. Interesting, the taxonomy of many species on the Falklands. I won't go into much detail about it, but there's a lot of interesting species there that should and will be split in the future. So looking on the left-hand side of the image here of the white-tufted grebe, it's kind of interesting. The birds on the Falklands are the true white-tufted grebes. As you can see on the right-hand side, that's an illustration of the birds on the mainland of South America. They look very, very different, and there's almost certainly, it's still not conclusive, but there's certainly a good split there involved. You can see the differences in plumage colorations, and also the size of the Falkland Island birds' beaks is much bigger than the birds on the mainland. Around all the penguin colonies and shag colonies, you will find brown skuas, or the Falkland Island skuas. They are really predatory. They are like their eggs and chicks if they get the chance, often hunting in pairs together. We'll also have a chance to visit the famous Port Stanley, where the lupin show there is always incredible. This church is very spectacular, and you see the arch in front of the church. That's the jawbones of a blue whale. And I've never seen anywhere in the world with so many different colors of lupins. They really are gorgeous. One of the most wanted endemics on the Falklands is the Falkland steamer ducks. They're flightless. This is a male in the foreground and a female in the back behind. We also have the chance of finding the delightful rufous-chested dotterel with a bit of luck. These breed on the moors there. They are very, very pretty. And the striated caracara is very, very sought after on some of the islands there. It's one of their strongholds. They're quite interested when we visit the islands. They'll come up and look at you, and they're completely fearless, and they'll walk all over your equipment if you put it down on the ground, and fascinating to watch them. Very, very intelligent birds. The Falklands are in fact, or are they not, a stronghold for the ruddy-headed goose. The reason I'm talking about this species is because it needs to be split. Interestingly enough, the birds on the Falklands are doing very, very well indeed, whereas the birds on the mainland of Patagonia are not doing well at all. I will explain here a little bit. The Cornell Ornithological Lab did some research genetically on these two different birds. The birds on the Falklands are slightly larger. They are resident. There's about 20,000 birds. They're doing well on the Falklands, whereas the birds on the mainland of South America, in Patagonia they breed, in Chile and Argentina, are doing extremely poorly. They are longer winged, slightly larger, and migratory, and they migrate to sort of central Argentina, unfortunately, where they are protected but often shot. And so the numbers are accidentally shot, their numbers are going down, and it's a situation where these birds really critically needs to be split so that they can help the conservation, because as what we look at the moment, the number of birds is doing well, but they really are two species, and the South American birds are in real need of conservation, and so they need to be split ASAP. Poorly named but lovely looking white bridled finch. If you see these birds in flight, you will see they have beautiful yellow wing linings, and they are often named canary winged finch, which is a much better name, I feel. This is a male. Another local bird got great voice is the long-tailed meadowlark. This again is a beautiful male. And we have the imperial cormorant on the islands in big colonies breeding. Very attractive bird here. This is the albiventa subspecies on the Falklands. Southern rockhopper penguins, as I said, are very, very popular with the groups. They have incredible mountaineering habit. You can see they have really strong claws on this illustration here, this slide. The claws are needed to be able to climb up to areas to breed. A lot of the penguins, particularly as you go further south into South Georgia and into the Antarctic particularly, there are very few areas without snow. And so often, you know, it's like 1% of Antarctica, for example, has bare rock. And so that 1% is where the penguins have to breed, because they can't make a nest of snow. So they have to get the rocks to make the nest. And so they often have to travel several kilometers away from the water, up on the mountains to breed. So all the penguins have these very strong feet and claws to enable them to be able to clamber up to these nesting sites. So we cruise from the Falkland Islands to the South Georgia Islands, which are one of my favorite locations on our planet. These Sub-Antarctic islands are so rich. This is a magnificent wandering albatross here on a nest. As we leave the Falkland Islands around the coast, we want to keep our eyes open for dusky dolphins. The following morning when we wake up, we have the delicious and dangerous freshly baked goodies before breakfast. There's also a lovely coffee machine where you can meet people before breakfast. Those of you people up early, bird watching on the decks with me, either off the bow or the back of the ship, you know, that we're often found scavenging here from these delicious goodies. And the reason is there are magnificent seabirds out there, such as the wandering albatross following the ships. This is a magnificent adult bird here. You can see a little bit of an orangey yellow ear patch, 3-meter wingspan. To watch these birds is just breathtaking, really is breathtaking. You cannot get enough of watching the albatrosses off the ship. We begin to see our first pintado, or Cape petrels. I prefer the name pintado. Pintado in Spanish means painted, and it looks like somebody's painted the markings on these beautiful petrels' wings. Also, we're keeping our eye open for cetaceans. These southern oceans are incredibly rich with cetaceans. We often encounter fin whales here feeding. After a day or so, we will see some land, and it's shag rocks. And on the shag rocks, this is home to thousands of South Georgia shags. Here's one flying across the bow of the ship that I took. And finally, land ahoy, we will see the beautiful hanging glaciers and snow-capped mountains of South Georgia Island, which is, as I said, the icing on the cake. For me, it's a true paradise, home to 30 million seabirds, of which 7 million plus are penguins. So this is the upside down world under the sea. And what I mean by that is, in the wintertime, the southern oceans freeze over. Another 19 million square kilometers gets frozen. And as the spring suns start melting the pack ice, the algae underneath the ice starts growing and starts reproducing like crazy. And this is what the krill, the Antarctic krill, feed on. And they reproduce like crazy and form trillions and trillions of krill. And that really fires the whole ecosystem of the Antarctic. It's like comparing the huge grasslands of East Africa with millions of wildebeest and zebra, etc., grazing on them. That's what the algae is to this ecosystem. So we have wildlife-packed beaches, which are typical on all our landings on South Georgia. In fact, sometimes it's hard to land. There's so much wildlife on there. Here's an illustration with the fur seals, Antarctic fur seals, and a beach full of king penguins with a sheathbill walking back there in the background. Again, we depart from our vessel on these zodiacs, which are comfortable for cruising and offer exciting, safe landings. Always mostly wet landings. As I said, when we land, we are given instructions of where to go, and you will meet me and we can go around and explore these fantastic colonies of penguins, etc. together. These immaculate king penguins here are taking a swim to clean up. They are extremely fast in the ocean, extremely good swimmers. Some of them will swim several hundred kilometers to feed their chicks. They feed mostly on fish, which they chase after. They can spend 8 to 10 minutes under the water and dive down to depths of incredible depths of like 300 meters. They are really, really good swimmers. Sometimes we're lucky to find a rainbow. This is over Salisbury Plains. It's caused by fine particles being blown off the glacier, forming this magnificent rainbow over the beach with king penguins. On South Georgia, we have the world's largest king penguin colony. To actually be there and hear and smell and experience this is something you will never forget. This is 400,000 strong. This is St. Andrew's Bay, a sea of king penguins. Really something you will never, ever forget, an experience of a lifetime. Is any bird as immaculate as the king penguin? I don't think so. Looking at this bird, just look at the beauty of its plumage. This bird has the densest number of feathers on any bird on our planet. It's 100 feathers per square inch. They are very small, broad feathers. In fact, if you touch a penguin, which we don't do on the trip, but if you have the chance of touching a penguin, often in Grytviken, there is the museum where you can actually touch, a flipper of a penguin. It feels like fur. And for the bird to keep these in such great condition, diving a lot, they have to spend at least every year 1 month sitting, miserable, molting every single body feather. And also the mandibular plate here, this orange plate on the beak with a nice blue mark there, they actually replace that every year also. This is a beautiful adult king penguin. This is not such a beautiful, but it's a really cute young penguin, king penguin. They are called oakum boys. And this was coined by the early 20th century sailors. What they used to do on the wooden boats, they used to unwind string and rope, dip it in tar, and then use that to stuff into any leaking boards, hence the name oakum. Antarctic fur seals are returning to pre-whaling numbers. They were almost, before whaling, they were almost exterminated completely. About 1.5 million were killed and slaughtered on the islands. Now the numbers have exceeded that. They're around about 6 million Antarctic fur seals. This is Grytviken Harbour, South Georgia. Always very pleasant to visit here. This is where anyone who's doing research or working on the island is housed. To the left-hand side of the illustration and over to the right there. Whenever we visit Grytviken, we have to have our pilgrimage to the grave of the great Sir Ernest Shackleton. This was an absolute incredible story of the Endurance Expedition, which was trying to reach the South Pole in 1916. After leaving South Georgia, a couple of days later, they got stuck in pack ice, where they were stuck. Basically, the Endurance was stuck for over a year before it crumpled up, and they found their way towing over the ice, a couple of lifeboats to Elephant Island. And on Elephant Island, Shackleton left his crew and headed out with 7 of his crew members to try and find South Georgia in a small boat, which was 23 foot long or 7 meters, called the James Caird. They had to find South Georgia 800 miles away. Can you imagine? No GPS, nothing like that. They actually had to find it. So Shackleton and his group, after 16 days and incredibly treacherous, stormy weather on the oceans, managed to find South Georgia. But unfortunately, they didn't land on the right side that they wanted to. So they then had to endure 36 hours hiking over these huge 9,000-foot mountains, snow-covered mountains, to the other side of the island, where they came out on Stromness, whaling station, and then they were amazed to go all the way back again and save the rest of the sailors that left on Elephant Island. I mean, it's just an incredible story. Anyway, to me, no one will ever be able to do that again. In fact, funnily enough, a French expedition tried to retrace just the hiking of Shackleton across the mountains of South Georgia and failed. So it just gives you an idea of how incredible. In those days, sailors were real men. Anyway, so this is the famous Stromness whaling station that Shackleton came out over the mountains there, much to the amazement of the whaling people. They were just absolutely blown away that suddenly 3 people would, appear over the mountains from nowhere. So Grytviken was a whaling station here until 1965. Very sad times. Amazing numbers of whales were taken. Some of the figures, 176,000 whales were taken within a day's sailing of South Georgia. So really, the numbers of whales, thankfully, are coming back again. But my goodness, it's lucky they have been able to survive. Another Antarctic fur seal. Here, this is they have flourished again. About 6 million on the island, and this is a rare blonde pup. It's about 1 in every 1,000 is blonde. The vultures of the oceans here are these giant petrels. This is a rare white form of the southern giant petrel, and a northern giant petrel in the background, much larger. Again, South Georgia has an incredibly important number of breeding pairs of wandering albatross. This is a nest on Pryan Island that we hopefully will visit. Just to give you an idea of the size of these birds, they're enormous. We all know they have a huge wingspan, over 3 meters, but they're the size and weight of a mute swan, just to give you an idea. So actually sit by the side of one of these birds on the island is a real privilege. They're very, very excellent flyers, but they're not that good at landing. You know, they can't go into reverse thrust, so they have these huge web feet for taking off the sea, but also taking off the land. They have to have these very exposed, windswept islands to breed on. And this is, they look kind of ungainly on land, but they are beautiful birds. Here is a mate calling on its nest. You know, many of these wandering albatrosses have had real problems with longline fishing, which I'll talk about a little bit later on, but to see these birds on the nest is really tremendous. They are enormous flying machines. Macaroni penguins are a very common breed on South Georgia here. Again, they're the best rock climbers on South Georgia. You can see the very, very strong claws there on their feet, their web feet for climbing, and they literally, they can climb up mountains that even I couldn't climb up. I mean, they really are tremendous. The island here is a seabird heaven. It really is. There is nowhere in the world with more seabirds as this island. This is a king penguin here, carefully inspecting its egg it's incubating, which it balances on top of its feet and is covered by a flap of skin. It's just turning the egg over there. This is an almost ready to fledge juvenile king penguin. It takes almost a full year to fledge, in fact. They take swimming off, you know, off from the colony in November or December, and they'll spend 5 to 8 years before they return to the colony at sea. One of my favorites here on the island are the magnificent, elegant, light-mantled albatross. Here's one with a chick on a nest. Look at that beautiful marking around the eye. Isn't that gorgeous? A success story on the island is the South Georgia pintail. Interestingly enough, it's the only duck known to eat flesh. During the wintertime, there's not much to be eaten, and so they end up scavenging on dead carcasses. They have increased extremely well, bounced back after the rats were finally eradicated on South Georgia. The South Georgia Heritage Society have done an amazing job of over 3 or 4 years getting rid of all the rats and reindeer that were on the island. They were killing countless thousands, hundreds of thousands of birds by eating their eggs and killing chicks. So it's a fantastic job they've done. Another bird that's done extremely well, we only used to see these on these small islands that were rat-free around South Georgia. Now this bird, the South Georgia pipit, is found all over the island. The numbers have rebounded incredibly well. It's wonderful to hear them singing on many of the sites we now land at. And this is the most southern breeding songbird in the world and endemic to South Georgia. This is a young king penguin here showing some aggression towards the brown or Sub-Antarctic skua. And there is a reason that it does that, as nature can be very cruel. You know, to be in all fairness to the skuas, and here this is a giant petrel, a giant petrel, southern giant petrel on the left-hand side is several of these, you know, injured and damaged king penguins, you know, are dying anyway, and so they're just basically, you know, surviving by predating on these weak, injured birds. And here's a sad end of a king penguin here. This is an illustration of the northern giant petrel here. They breed earlier than the southern giant petrels. They time their breeding around the seal pupping time, around November-ish. This is a good illustration of the beak of this bird here. Look how sharp the hook is on the beak there for eating into flesh. All these seabirds, these we call tube noses, are incredible, and penguins as well, are incredibly good at getting out salt. So they can drink seawater, they can get rid of the salt. They have some salt glands near the base of the eye there. They take the salt out of the bloodstream, and then they will excrete the salt through this tube nose. You'll often see a drip of salt on the end of the bird's beak here. This is a beautiful image of king penguins and the glacier in Gold Harbor. This really brings back to me my first trip in the early 1990s to South Georgia. Was something I will never forget, as this glacier here you can see, which is way back there, used to come all the way down to the beach where I'm standing, or where I took this photograph. It used to come down to the beach there and into the sea, and now with global warming it has receded like several kilometers. As I said, this is the most favorite place in the world to me, Gold Harbor. Magnificent. We often arrive there early in the morning to have the sunrise, and there is a reason, because the reason it's called Gold Harbor is can be only seen at dawn. This was taken about 4 o'clock in the morning. We had an amazing landing last trip we had there, and had this little kind of stormish looking weather. It cleared up, and you can see the golden outline and the mountains there behind the King Colony. The interesting, the King Colony here, when I first arrived, visited Gold Harbor, was I think 300 pairs. Now it's 30,000 pairs. King penguins are doing extremely well. They're a success story. Along the beaches here, we have many, as I call them, beach slugs. These are southern elephant seals. The males are here in November, looking after their harems, fighting for their harems. They get up to like 4 tons. They are absolutely incredible animals. The other interesting thing about southern elephant seals is they have incredible diving. They can dive down to a staggering depths and spend over 2 hours under the water, getting down to about 2,000 meters in depth. I mean, when the first scientists put the paraphernalia on these animals to work out about depth of diving, and they didn't believe it. They could not believe it, but it's true. They go that far down. They spend something like 90% of time underwater when they're away from their breeding areas. Here's a young male southern elephant seal learning how to make snorting noises with the king penguins in the background. And teenagers, what can I say? Here these Gen 2 teenagers are up to no good, pestering and playing with a southern elephant seal. In fact, after this photograph was taken, the elephant seal got very annoyed and flipped off this youngster on his back, and it got almost squashed between the next seal, and then it managed to get its way out, and then they all ran off up the beach. But very, very fun to watch the antics of these delightful little Gen 2s. Yeah, big eyes. Female elephant seal pup here. These big eyes they used when they're diving, obviously, to see what they're doing under the water, I would guess. They always look bloodshot, and they're pretty cute. So we finally have to say goodbye to South Georgia, cruise across the Scotia Sea to the Antarctic peninsula, where awaits incredible vistas like this. And on the way, we will see lots of cetaceans. Humpback whales, some of the commonest. In fact, each of these humpback whales has a unique tail pattern. If you get a good photograph, you can send it to happywhale.com, and they will send back the information. You give them the dates where you saw it, and they'll send back the information of the history and movements of the whale. It's really fascinating and really help with the science and understanding of the movements of these glorious whales. We can start doing some pelagic birding off the vessel again. Northern giant petrel here flying past the ship. One of the birds we always look for is the Antarctic petrel and snow petrel. This is the Antarctic petrel. They're the 2 most southern breeding seabirds in the world. And this is the beautiful upper side view of the Antarctic petrel. This beautiful pattern and white and dark brown on the wings. One of my most favorite seabirds, though, is the elegant and extremely graceful light-mantled albatross. Having one of these gliding behind the vessel is a moment you will never forget. They are absolutely just hovering there, incredible birds. We can see the immense 12-foot wingspans of wandering albatross. This is a first summer bird here, gliding past the ship. Down to the tiny and smallest Antarctic breeding seabird, the Wilson storm petrel. As I'm a bird bander, as many of you know, the storm petrels have an incredibly beautiful, if you ring them or band them, they have an incredibly beautiful oily smell that's unique to storm petrels. As we head towards the Antarctic, we'll start spotting our first icebergs. This is a huge tabular iceberg, about 3 stories or 4 stories high. This one, immense size. Unfortunately, there's nothing there to give you an idea of the size of this huge berg. And Antarctica is home to a new cool set of penguins for us. The brush-tailed penguins, like this chinstrap penguin, sometimes called the English penguin because it looks like a bobby with the chinstrap holding on his hat, a bobby on the beat. One of the 2 southernmost breeding penguins is the Adelie penguin. These are very, very cute and very, very interested often at approaching us closely. On the fast ice, we will also start to see crab-eating seals. They love resting on the ice like this one, and you can see the scars all over the animal here. Those are mostly scars made by leopard seals when they were young. Almost every single crab eater has scars where it's had a narrow escape with the leopard seal. So here's an illustration of our vessel anchored near an iceberg, and we're going out on our Zodiac cruises exploring the ice. In the Weddell Sea, we particularly are looking for a rare encounter on the ice. About 1 in every 3 trips, we are lucky enough to find an emperor penguin. This, to me, has to be one of the most amazing birds in the world. Its breeding behavior is phenomenal. Where it breeds is phenomenal. Everything about this bird is phenomenal. You can see an Adelie penguin. They're often found with adelies in the background. So once in every 3 trips to 4 trips, we're lucky enough to find an emperor penguin. This is such an experience. To find one of these amazing animals on the ice is fantastic. This was an immature emperor penguin we found on a vent trip, along with an Adelie in the background. And to me, this is the king of all birds. Let me give you some information. We won't see these breeding. They breed way further south, but in the Weddell Sea, if we have a chance of finding them, I'll be up looking for them. We'll be out looking for them. But if we find one, we'll be extremely lucky. But let me just give you a bit of information about the breeding biology of this bird. It is the king of all birds. They leave the sea onto the pack ice, often having to walk up to 100 miles to their breeding colonies. The males arriving first. They use the method of tobogganing, a little bit like what this individual is doing here, tobogganing along the ice. But it can take weeks to get to their breeding colony. They wait for the females to arrive, they court, they mate, and then she lays an egg. The egg is huge. It's about 12 centimeters long. It weighs about 500 grams. And they then have to do the most difficult thing of all, which is passing the egg to the male without it freezing. If you can imagine on the ice, it can't spend much time on the ice, otherwise it will freeze. It's also already winter. The male takes it onto the upper side of his foot, covers it over with his fat blubber. He's about 45 kilos. He's very fat, having eaten lots and lots of food to pass through the winter. Then he has to balance that egg on top of his foot and turn it over once in a while during the harshest of the weather you can imagine. 2 months without any sun, katabatic winds, sometimes reaching minus 35 degrees Celsius. Can you imagine how cold it is? They have to, the males are all in a tight circle. They have to keep moving from the inside to the outside, otherwise they'd freeze. And then after all of this, he has to 4 months without eating before the chick hatches. 4 months. So when the chick hatches, he is able to produce some food for about 4 to 5 days. And miraculously, the female appears at the right time, all fully full of food, able to look after the youngster, takes it off the male, and the male then has to hike all the way back out. The ice is not so far away from the sea this time, but hikes all the way out again to the sea, where he feeds up, and then they take it in turns, you know, to feed on silverfish, the youngsters. It takes about 5 months for the youngsters to take in about 100 kilos of food before, after about 150 days old, they fledge. So anyway, the breeding biology of this bird is absolutely phenomenal. So we then reach the Shetland Islands, which hold the Argentinian research base here on Deception Island. It's actually an active volcano. We again see the delightful gentoo penguins. Interestingly enough, just last year, research has found that the gentoo penguin is in fact 4 different species. So we see 3 of the 4 species on this trip. This is an Antarctic gentoo penguin. The endemic gentoo penguin on the Falklands is called the northern gentoo penguin, if I remember correctly. It's larger, longer build, different genetics, and also feeds on different prey. As you can see, it's got a little bit more white flecking on the head. The other species that we see is on South Georgia. So we see 3 out of the 4 different species of gentoo penguins. So gentoo penguins are extremely fast swimmers, as I said before, the fastest of all, 35 to 40 kilometers an hour. These Antarctic gentoos here are incubating, and as I said, you can see they found an area where there is no ice and snow to put the pebbles together to make their nests. And to me, the gentoo penguins chicks are some of the cutest of all the penguin chicks. This is an interesting one. There's 3. One pair actually had 3 chicks. It's the first ever record of 3 chicks together from one adult. Icebergs are always a joy and fascinating to study and to photograph. Always not forgetting only 10% of the iceberg is visible, 90% is underneath the water. And the colors and formations of these icebergs is absolutely fascinating. As I said before, one of the southern breeding penguins is the Adelie. They're always cute and very, very inquisitive. This one is hiding on an ice floe from its main predator and wants to get in our zodiac with us. And the main predator, the apex predator below the ocean, looking for them, is the huge leopard seal. Look at the teeth on this. It catches a penguin and tosses it in the air and turns it inside out and eats it all in one. They are very, very ferocious predators. However, in the ocean realms, it's not that easy for the leopard seals to catch them, because these adelies can also top speed of about 25 miles an hour or 40 kilometers an hour. So, you know, it's a surprise attack that the leopard seals managed to catch one of these very agile birds. We see them, you know, walking around on land, and they look not very well adapted to land, but to the sea they surely are. They're like little torpedoes. We take a long time looking at icebergs and these different ice flows, and we find some incredibly interesting ice formations. This was one I took a photograph of. It looks like a grebe or an alcid to me. Not man-made, completely made by wind and erosion. Quite spectacular. And we have this mesmerizing black ice, thousands of years old. Sometimes we'll take some of these small pieces back to our vessel, and we can break them up, and you have them as ice cubes in your cocktails at night. This is a close-up of one of my favorite little penguins here, the Adelies. They are so cute. Again, they're very broad-billed, a little bit like the crested penguins, the macaroni penguins. They feed mostly on krill. And here we see the colonies are orange with the krill. And here's an adult feeding, regurgitating krill to its youngster. In fact, if you look closely, you can see the eye of the krill there in the beak of the Adelie penguin there, little black dot. Like my mohawk, it's all in the fashion, not much. Yeah. They are kind of cute. Very, very cute indeed. This bird is about to fledge. It'll probably in the next week or so start swimming out and leave the colony. Sometimes we're very, very lucky to be able to find snow petrels incubating. This bird will actually bury its way into the snow, into crevices to make a cavity to lay its eggs. This and the Antarctic petrel are the two most southern breeding seabirds in the world. Chinstrap penguin colonies, a real paradise in the Antarctic there with a zodiac in the background. Very, very vocal these penguins are at their colonies, and just fascinating to watch their behavior. And look how different these chinstrap penguin chicks look than the dark brown Adelies. Snowy sheathbills are the trash removers and scavengers here. This one's working on an old egg, probably taking out some yolk that's still in there or something else. Very, very funny looking birds and very inquisitive. One time I was in a Zodiac, driving a Zodiac many years ago, and I had one sheathbill land on my Zodiac. Within 3 or 4 minutes, I had 9 sheathbills on my Zodiac, and I radioed in, said, I'm going to do a Zodiac cruise with the sheathbills on board. And people looked off the ship and couldn't believe what they could see. We were having a barbecue that day. I think it attracted the smell, it attracted these sheathbills. Then they fouled up my Zodiac, and so I had to clean it up before I took people off to see a penguin colony. We have a magical time getting on landing on the Antarctic Peninsula here. This is our last year's group in having a wonderful time on a beautiful evening here on the Antarctic Peninsula with our vessel in the background. And then for those of you who are very, very brave, we can have the Antarctic plunge. And after taking the plunge myself, I know how cold it is, and I know why the Weddell seal is so plump. They are very, very beautiful seals. Have an incredible vocalization, a beautiful song. I didn't realize that until just a few weeks ago when I heard a excerpt of the beautiful song of this seal. So we also have the opportunity of fun Antarctic barbecues. The crew do an amazing job. And on the Lido deck, we can also enjoy our lunches when the weather's good, like it is here, and observe whales from while eating our lunch or dinner. We can enjoy fabulous Zodiac cruises in the Antarctic. Here's a group of penguins playing and preening and messing around on the iceberg. And we even see them training for the Olympics, diving here off the iceberg. This is some Adelies seen last year on our last year trip. And we even have incredible encounters with humpback whales feeding in the Antarctic, lots and lots of humpback whales feeding on krill. You can see the baleen here, where they filter out the krill. We've seen them using the bubbles in big circles to come up and catch the krill, and just fantastic creatures. Then we finally leave the Antarctic and we cruise back across the Drake Passage, which is one of the best places in the world for enjoying pelagic birding. There's nothing like seeing a snow petrel in a snowstorm on the Drake Passage. This is like a bird of peace to me, like a white pigeon, but it's absolutely glorious and just so iconic. Also have incredible encounters with eye level wandering albatrosses gliding past if the winds are right. They can come in unbelievably close, as this one did. We can enjoy watching the Chilean skuas harassing black-browed albatrosses. I've even seen them harassing wandering albatross, and they are absolutely tiny, but they are feisty, chasing them to try and take off their fish, that they make them regurgitate fish. There's just no other words. Simply, albatrosses rock. This is another image of an adult wandering albatross. And again, they're huge, 3-meter wingspan. You just can't get enough off the back or the bow of the boat watching these magnificent birds as they drift by effortlessly. The smaller mollymawks, this is a grey-headed albatross. Again, very, very pretty, passing in the Drake Passage. And we can scan the mixed prion flocks of slender-billed and Antarctic prions here in the hopes of finding a similar blue petrel. You can note the distinctive white tail tip here, and they're often found in flocks of prions, but also on their own. Very nice little bird that people enjoy seeing. And again, the attractive flocks of pintado petrels or Cape petrels are often following the ship, giving wonderful views. Also keeping an eye out for soft plume petrel, incredibly strong gadfly petrel. These pterodromas just drift by very, very quickly, so you have to spend some time on deck to see them, but we always see them on our cruises. And of course, the very powerful flyers, even far from land, right in the middle of the ocean, you can come across South Polar skuas. One of the unusual and odd, poorly known birds in the area here is the diving petrel. This is used to be called common diving petrel. It's now again being split. This is now a sub-Antarctic diving petrel. To me, they look more like alphids, but it's actually genetically most closely related to storm petrels. They nest in burrows. And white-chinned petrel, even on a close image like this, it's very hard to see its white chin, but these are very, very common. And so here's some information as regards our Sea Adventurer, the ship facilities, elevators, 2 elevators to all passenger decks, a wonderful library, a fitness center and sauna, heated salted swimming pool, and a wonderful library. As I said before, this is a great vessel for exploration because it's of its ice hull rating is a super ice hull rating class. And here's some illustrations of the beautiful, luxurious rooms that you can have on the Sea Adventurer. The porthole staterooms, the veranda staterooms, the owner's suite, and the veranda with balcony. The club bar and the dining room, where the cuisine is always extraordinary. So as I said, if you want to come on this trip and lose weight, it's not a good idea. The food here is absolutely out of this world. And the Lido deck and the sun deck and heated pool, both common spaces. And as I said, you can enjoy and good weather on the leader deck. You can enjoy having a meal there instead of being down below, where you can see the seabirds and whales and penguins right off deck as you're eating. As I said, this is a trip of a lifetime. Many people ask me what is my most favorite trip of all. That's a hard question. I've been lucky enough to visit some of the most incredible areas on our planet, but this really has to go down as one of the most amazing trips that I have ever done in my life. If I speak to any event participants who have been on multiple trips all around the world, almost all of them will say in the top one is, the Antarctic. So it really is a trip of a lifetime. Okay, here's some suggested readings for you for birds and other references. The Birds of Chile, Oceanic Birds of the World just come out. The Antarctic Wildlife Guide, done by my good friend Hadaram Shuriai from Israel, and the Whales and Dolphins, also a Princeton book done by Hadaram again, and natural history and history books, The Crystal Desert, Summer in Antarctica, Eye of the Albatross, The South Pole, and of course Endurance, Shackleton's ship, and an absolutely amazing read. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this trip of a lifetime. I hope I have passed on my amazing love of this area close to my heart. I hope that the world can keep it as pristine and as magical as it is now for our children and grandchildren to see. Big hug from Brazil. Take care. I look forward to traveling with you all again soon. And here's an Antarctic sunset, and take care. Goodbye.
I hope you enjoyed Andy's excellent presentation. Now I would like to introduce you all to Aurora Expeditions, an award-winning expedition cruise company with over 30 years of experience. Vent has partnered with Aurora Expeditions to offer 5 small ship adventures, 2 of which are going to Antarctica, South Georgia, and the Falkland Islands later this year. Back on November 11th, 2021, we hosted a webinar with Victor Emanuel, Lyon and Lisa Bertini, Director of North American Sales at Aurora. I have borrowed several video clips from this presentation to relay the details about the Greg Mortimer expedition vessel, expedition team, and the 2 tour offerings later this year that will be led by Barry Lyon and the other by Rick Wright.
We have 2 brand new purpose-built expedition ships, and with an average capacity of 132 passengers. We operate some of the smallest new expedition ships in the market. They're small enough to get into those nooks and crannies, and with a 1-to-8 expedition team to passenger ratio, there's more time to ask questions and get that individual one-on-one attention. The Greg Mortimer on the left actually was the first passenger ship equipped with the unique Ulstein X bow. It's that funny looking, looks like almost an iron that you would use on your clothes. And you'll see that popping up more and more in the expedition sector, but we were the first to bring it to the passenger ship. What it does is it cuts through the swells and reduces the feelings of vibrations, and it also reduces fuel consumption. Our Sylvia Earle on the right is named after the renowned marine biologist, oceanographer, Dr. Sylvia Earle. What I love about her story is that she was the first female NASA scientist back in the 60s. We have named each of the decks on board the Sylvia Earle after 7 global female. Our ships offer a Citizens of Science project, which we are going to be focusing on whales, seabirds, microplastics, weather patterns, phytoplankton, polar fjords, and marine biodiversity. So we've chosen 7 dynamic projects that are actually being worked on right now, and we're going to be gathering data for these groundbreaking global works of science. The ships themselves are beautifully appointed. We truly believe that it's a great place to come back to after exploring, but our focus is on the destinations that we visit. So these ships allow us to get into those small nooks and crannies, but you still get to return to beautiful cabins and great lecture hall and delicious food. So people often ask, okay, Lisa, what makes Aurora Expeditions different? And I kind of say that's really 3 things. One, it's our 30-year history, because when you travel to these remote areas, you want to have a company that has the experience. They've been there. They have an expedition team and leader that knows how to get into those small places if Mother Nature changes their minds, to always bring out the best of wherever they're at and the location, and to find those unique, memorable moments. Secondly, we are Australia-based, and that means that most of our, or some of our E-team are all from the Australia. And that flavor, that warm and welcoming and embracing spirit lives on board. And it makes a very approachable crew. And it also makes every single person feel right at home and full of attention. And that's what is really exciting about our partnership with Vent, is that we are bringing on Vent leaders into our crew for each of these 5 departures. And then I think the third is that we have purpose-built ships. I love this picture on the right because it shows on the Greg Mortimer something that was designed where these flaps come down when we're in remote areas, and you can actually go out and look over these flows of glaciers and actually be down almost eye to eye with the wildlife. I can't wait to actually experience that. The third is, I've kind of mentioned, but it's our expedition team. Like I said, we have a fantastic expedition team. And as Victor mentioned, our crew and our staff are one of the most important assets that we have. And although our team can choose to work for different suppliers, most of our E-team have saved themselves every year for Aurora. And so what that means is that you have accredited, knowledgeable, and experienced team members that have worked together as a team for over the past 10 years. So we couldn't be more proud of this.
Okay, so from the North Atlantic to the far South Atlantic, again, we will be offering 2 additional cruises to Antarctica, the Antarctic region, in late 2022 and 2023. So the Falklands, South Georgia, and Antarctic Peninsula trip this trip parallels the main program that we're going to be operating in January, and one that has been sold out. And as we talk about our Antarctica program, it isn't just about Antarctica. Our trips also include the South Atlantic outposts of the Falkland Islands and South Georgia Island. And the reason for that is that those places is where most of the wildlife is actually found. Antarctica is the peninsula. It's spectacular. It's beautiful. There are very special things to see there, but the entire experience is greatly accentuated by being able to visit the Falklands and South Georgia. And so the first of these two additional trips will operate November 26th through December 18th, 2022. We have already sold a number of cabins, but there are still cabins available. And just as I've highlighted here with these bullet points, trying to sum up Antarctica, well, it's difficult to do in bullet points. It's a bigger than life experience. And however, it is about the birds and the wildlife. We hope to see 7 species of penguins. If we're lucky, we might see the emperor penguin. 6 types of albatross, excellent marine mammals, including whales, dolphins, elephant seals, and fur seals. And this trip, being a little on the earlier side, we have an especially good chance of seeing the male elephant seals still on the beaches.
And I would add that that is an excellent time of year to be going to Antarctica. The penguins are setting on their eggs. Some of the eggs are hatching. You're seeing young penguins. The weather is usually good at that time of year. Sea conditions can vary from crossing to crossing. Some of them can be rather mild. Some can be rougher. But an advantage of the Greg Mortimer is the construction with that prow sticking out is going to reduce the rolling of the ship. And we're very glad to be offering this trip.
Yeah, absolutely. And, what we emphasize is that, yes, Antarctica, the birds and the birding is incredible. No question. The seabirds, the penguins, the albatross. However, with that being said, Antarctica should not be viewed as a birding trip. It is a complete all-around natural history experience. And it overwhelms, and I mean that in a good way. It overwhelms in every way imaginable. And in addition to the event leaders on this trip, of course, these trips are staffed with experts in history, for people who know history, geology, biology, other disciplines of history and natural history that together serve to give you to an enhanced experience.
And what the experience of the history is, of course, most famous for the Shackleton trip, where he went down and tried to cross the South Pole and didn't make it and had to come back on a small boat to go to South Georgia. It's quite a very exciting and moving story to hear about Shackleton and the other explorers. It was probably the last part of the globe that got explored. And it was seen at a distance by the great Captain Cook, but he didn't get to go actually down to Antarctica, but he was almost down to Antarctica. And he did. South Georgia was claimed by the British and is a island run by the British. And one of the things that's wonderful at South Georgia, and that's where the nesting petrels and seabirds, including the wonderful albatross nesting there, is that recently, with a huge effort, they've gotten rid of all invasive species, including the rats. And that's caused the number of birds to increase on South Georgia. Gold Harbor at South Georgia, which I think will be a picture later, Peter Harrison, who wrote the Seabirds of the World book, it's his favorite place in the world.
Yeah, exactly. And I do want to point out, I'm flipping back to the map slide here because I want to say something about the route because it's relevant to when we profile the next Antarctica cruise. This trip starts and ends in Ushuaia, southernmost town or city in Argentina, in the world. We will go from there to the Falkland Islands, then to South Georgia, where we will have 4 full days, and then down to the Antarctic Peninsula. And the route is never exactly determined until just before, but between the South Shetland Islands and the Antarctic Peninsula, you will spend a number of days there before coming back across the Drake Passage to Ushuaia. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through some slides just to impart, a sense of intimacy about what Antarctica is like. And a lot of that is because you get so close to things.
And let me add on about Antarctica. When I went for the first time, I would never have thought that one of my favorite things on the whole trip were the icebergs. Mm-hmm. I had never seen an iceberg before. Each one had a different shape. Some had penguins on them that dove into the water from the penguin. Their color of the iceberg varied depending on the sun direction. And I took so many pictures of icebergs that I told people on the trip, I'm not going to photograph another iceberg. And then there was another iceberg, and I grabbed my camera to get a photograph of the iceberg. So it's odd to think you go on a trip just to see icebergs, but I can tell you that they are an amazing highlight.
Yes, they are. My first trip to Antarctica, the first expedition, was a trip that I made with Victor in 2005, and I was not prepared for just the immensity, the grandeur of the ice, as Victor was talking about. But scenes like this, a parade of penguins going down the beach, king penguins. Here's another amazing shot of adults and young birds alike. You're able to just walk right up to the colonies, the edge of the colony. Crab-eater seals. Leopard seal, always a big draw, a big deal for people. Everybody wants to see a leopard seal, and we should not have an issue with that. Here is Gold Harbor, spectacular scenery, spectacular lighting, and just the idea of getting off onto a remote beach in the company of tens of thousands of king penguins. It's a spectacle like no other.
And at the top of these cliffs you're seeing to the right, there are nesting light mantled city albatross, which I consider one of the most spectacular and beautiful birds in the world. And they're flying around, that you see them looking up at the cliffs, and they're quite amazing.
Truly. And right up there with the king penguins, the opportunity to see wandering albatross at close range. Some trips are fortunate to get to see these birds on their nests displaying. This is in the South Georgia area, but the amazing wandering albatross, the world's largest albatross.
And they follow the ships, these seabirds, and many of them follow the ships. And so one of the fun and exciting things to do is to go to the back of the ship and just watch what's following the ship, the different petrels and albatross and other birds.
And as we've talked about, Antarctica is about ice. And the ice appears in limitless shapes and sizes and even colors. You've got these tall tabular icebergs, these massive building-like icebergs as depicted on the left. And on the right, you get these beautiful wave-sculpted things, ice that's been in the water and just transformed into a true sculpture by the water. Here's another example. This is a massive berg broken off the continental ice shelf, and the water, the wave action erodes it out into fantastic tunnels and bridges and arches and so on. Off the ship, you will be on land, but you will also be zodiacking. And in this case, as these people are doing, this is part of the Antarctic experience, is to be motoring around ice in the water right up to the face of a glacier. It's almost indescribable.
And ice can be calving. Ice can be falling off into the water right there, and you see it happen.
Absolutely. The Antarctica is famous for its sunsets, where you get these beautiful skies stained purple and orange and pink, and the reflections on the snow. It is just tremendous. More images of Antarctic penguins, like these Gentoo penguins moving over the rocks. And a bird called the snowy sheathbill, a peculiar chicken-like bird. They are scavenger. They are both scavenger and predator, and they become like familiar friends on each of our landings. The Falklands, South Georgia, and Antarctic Peninsula will operate November 26th through December 18th with me, Barry Lyon, yours truly. And we still have space available on this trip. This price that you see here, the starting price at $24,071, is based in balcony C stateroom occupancy, meaning that this is the category, the starting price on the categories that we have for sale, or available to us rather. This price does reflect an early booking discount. However, other cabin categories are available along with various prices and some with discounts. As always, Greg Lopez or Patrick Swaggerty on our side are the people to get in touch with if you'd like more information or to register. Finally, we are offering another one, and this is the newest addition to our lineup of cruises with Aurora. This is what we call the South Georgia and Antarctic Odyssey, also aboard the Greg Mortimer. This trip will operate December 26th, 2022 to January 17th, 2023. This trip is very similar to the trip that we just described. The main difference is that instead of starting in Ushuaia and getting on this ship and being at sea for 2 days en route to the Falkland Islands, participants on this departure will start by flying to Santiago, Chile, and then from Santiago you will take a flight out to the Falkland Islands where the ship will be waiting. From there, it is essentially identical, and the experiences will be no different. Again,
I'd like to add that on all of our Antarctica trips, we offer and often pre and post trips only available to event passengers. For example, if the trip starts where we fly into Buenos Aires, there's wonderful birding and scenery around Buenos Aires. We offer a pre-trip there. You fly into Santiago, just right above Santiago, you can see condors. You can see other birds of the high Andes, just an hour or two above Santiago. And we offer that as a pre-trip before you leave Santiago. And then we offer as a post-trip, we also offer a pre-trip, a little extra birding around before you get on the boat, around Ushuaia. And so we offer more than just what you're going to see on the cruise. And I just want to add that my dear friend, Roger Torrey Peterson, who was one of my closest friends and almost like a second father to me, he was the most famous bird watcher and birder since Audubon, and did the first field guide on the birds of North America. Antarctica became his favorite destination. I don't know if he went 20 times or 30 times, I don't remember, but he would like going back and back to Antarctica. And I wondered why that was until I went there myself. And I understood why he fell in love with Antarctica. And now I've been about 6 or 7 times. And I talk to people about it. People often say to me, so many trips in so little time. One of the trips I think, if at all possible, you should do in your lifetime is Antarctica. One of the greatest places in the world for scenery, for birds, for mammals, for history. And so try to go on one of these trips.
This trip will be led by Rick Wright. Rick lives in New Jersey, but has led tours in many areas all over the U.S., in Europe. He's got a trip to South Africa planned next year. And we're excited, and I know Rick is too, to be going to Antarctica next year. Here again, we are in Balcony C. Our prices start in Balcony C stateroom occupancy. And so this trip will be limited to 16 people.
Thank you for attending today's presentation on Antarctica, South Georgia, and the Falkland Islands. Please contact us if you wish to sign up or have further questions for our team. May you enjoy the rest of your week. Until next time, goodbye from Vent.